She was beautiful, radiant, and once hailed as the woman who could break Hollywood's deepest barrier. Dorothy Dandridge wasn't just another actress, she was a symbol of possibility. The first black woman to walk onto the stage of the Academy Awards as a nominee for Best Actress. To many, she looked like the future, elegant, talented, and unstoppable. But Hollywood had other plans. Behind the dazzling lights and red carpets was a cruel reality. Dorothy could play a sultry siren, an exotic beauty, but she was never allowed to be the leading lady in love stories with white co-stars. She could sing at the most glamorous nightclubs in America, yet she couldn't use the same bathrooms as her audience. In the world that praised her, she was still unwelcome, trapped in a system that applauded her talent while reminding her she didn't belong. Her story is not just about fame, it's about a dream shattered by racism, about a star who rose higher than anyone thought possible, only to be brought down by the very industry that claimed to celebrate her. Dorothy Dandridge's life was a mix of triumph and tragedy, courage and heartbreak. And what happened to her remains one of Hollywood's most painful reminders of how racism destroys even the brightest lights. Dorothy Jean Dandridge was born on the 9th of November, 1922, in Cleveland, Ohio, into a world that already wanted to define her by the color of her skin. Her mother, Ruby Dandridge, was an aspiring actress who struggled to find respectable work in a Hollywood that offered only demeaning roles for black women maids, servants, or comic relief. Dorothy's father abandoned the family when she was still young, leaving Ruby to raise Dorothy and her sister Vivian alone. To survive, Ruby placed her daughters on stage almost as soon as they could walk, pushing them into a performing career that would become both their salvation and their curse. As children, Dorothy and Vivian performed as the Wonder Children, traveling the country during the Great Depression. Life on the road was harsh. They sang in smoky nightclubs, performed in run-down theaters, and often slept in segregated hotels or in no hotels at all, because many establishments refused black performers. But Dorothy's talent was undeniable. With striking beauty and a voice that could silence a crowd, she quickly became the shining star of the duo. By her teenage years, Dorothy moved to Los Angeles, chasing the dream that Hollywood dangled but rarely gave to black performers. She began performing at elite nightclubs like the Cotton Club and the Apollo Theater, dazzling audiences with her elegance and sophistication. Unlike most singers of the time, Dorothy carried herself with a regal poise that demanded respect, not just applause. Hollywood eventually came calling, but not with the roles Dorothy deserved. She was cast in bit parts, often uncredited, playing background dancers or nameless island girls. Yet, even in these small moments, the camera loved her. Producers whispered that she was too beautiful to be hidden, yet too black to be accepted as a mainstream star. Dorothy lived in this contradiction, always noticed, but never fully embraced. Still, she refused to give up. Every rejection, every door slammed in her face only made her more determined. And in the 1952nd, that determination would pay off at least for a while. Dorothy was about to make history, but the higher she climbed, the harsher the world would remind her of her place. Dorothy's breakthrough came in 1954, when she was cast as the lead in Otto Preminger's bold new adaptation of the opera Carmen Jones. At first, the role seemed out of reach. Studios were reluctant to gamble on a black actress as the central figure in a major motion picture. But Dorothy's screen test was undeniable, sultry, commanding, and magnetic. She didn't just play Carmen, she became her, breathing life into the fiery character in a way that no one else could. When Carmen Jones premiered, it shocked Hollywood. Audiences who had never seen a black actress in such a commanding, sensual, and glamorous role were captivated. Critics raved about her performance, calling Dorothy electric and a revelation. For the first time, a black actress wasn't hidden in the shadows or confined to supporting stereotypes. She was the star. The film was a box office success, and it changed the conversation about representation in Hollywood. The pinnacle came when Dorothy Dandridge was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, becoming the first black woman in history to receive the honor. On the night of the Oscars, Dorothy arrived in a gown that would later become iconic, shimmering white, with a confidence that seemed to announce her arrival at the very top of Hollywood. Yet behind the elegance was an aching truth. Dorothy knew that even as she sat among the biggest names in the industry, many of them still saw her as an outsider. She didn't win Grace Kelly, took home the statue for The Country Girl, but the nomination itself was a groundbreaking moment. Newspapers across the country hailed her as a pioneer, a woman who had broken through Hollywood's toughest barrier. For a brief time, it seemed like Dorothy Dandridge had changed the rules of the game. But Hollywood's applause was fleeting. Offers for leading roles didn't flood in the way she had hoped. Instead, she was offered exoticized parts, roles of seductresses, or films that kept her firmly within the limits of what white producers considered acceptable for a black actress. Dorothy had climbed higher than anyone thought possible, but the very system she challenged was already preparing to pull her back down. Dorothy Dandridge thought Carmen Jones would open the gates of Hollywood. Instead, it showed her just how tightly those gates were locked. After her historic Oscar nomination, she expected a flood of scripts, the kind of opportunities that turned actresses into legends. But what she received were offers for roles that reinforced the very stereotypes she had fought to escape: maids, tribal women, exotic temptresses, who were desired but never respected. Hollywood's unwritten rules were cruelly clear. Dorothy could be glamorous, but she could never be the romantic lead opposite a white man. Producers openly told her that audiences weren't ready to see a black woman kiss a white star on screen. Even when directors wanted her for more substantial roles, studios intervened, fearing backlash from segregated theaters in the South. Time after time, Dorothy's talent was acknowledged but caged, her career suffocated by prejudice. The racism wasn't confined to film sets. In Las Vegas, Dorothy would perform to standing ovations in luxury casinos. But afterward, she wasn't allowed to stay in the same hotels or swim in the same pools as her audience. On one infamous occasion, management drained the swimming pool after she dipped her toe in the water just to erase her presence. She was good enough to entertain, but never good enough to belong. These humiliations cut deep. While her white counterparts soared with offers, Dorothy was forced to turn down roles that demeaned her heritage, even if it meant going without work. She had proved herself capable of carrying a movie, of commanding the screen like any Hollywood starlet, but racism made sure she would never be treated as their equal. Behind the glamorous gowns and red carpet smiles, Dorothy was fighting a battle she could never truly win. Hollywood wanted her beauty, her talent, her presence, but only on its terms. And as she resisted those terms, the cracks in her career and in her personal life began to spread. As Dorothy Dandridge struggled with the barriers of Hollywood, her private life became just as turbulent as her career. In 1942, she married Harold Nicholas, one half of the famous Nicholas Brothers dance duo. At first, it seemed like a glamorous union, two young black stars in love, carving out their place in an industry stacked against them. But the marriage quickly soured. Harold's infidelity and constant absences left Dorothy lonely, and by 1951 the couple divorced. From that marriage came Dorothy's only child, Harold Suzanne, who was born with severe brain damage. Doctors told Dorothy that her daughter would never be able to live independently, and the burden of caring for Harold weighed heavily on her both emotionally and financially. Hollywood executives saw Dorothy as a glamorous starlet, but behind closed doors, she was a single mother, desperately trying to balance work with the endless medical care her daughter required. Financial struggles followed her everywhere. With limited roles available, Dorothy often lived beyond her means, forced to take nightclub gigs or poorly paid appearances just to survive. Despite being an Oscar-nominated actress, she was never paid at the level of her white peers, and by the late 1952, she was deep in debt. Her lifestyle, lavish gowns, elegant homes, and the need to present herself as Hollywood royalty only deepened the financial hole. Her love life brought little relief. Dorothy fell into a highly publicized relationship with white director Otto Preminger, who had cast her in Carmen Jones and later Porgy and Bess. Their affair was scandalous for the time, not only because of the racial divide, but also because Preminger was married. Dorothy believed he might help her career, but instead, the relationship left her more isolated. He discouraged her from taking roles that might have kept her visible, insisting she wait for better parts that never came. By the time their relationship ended, Dorothy had lost both personal stability and professional momentum. Every setback, failed marriage, financial strain, heartbreak, and the constant weight of racism chipped away at her resilience. To the public, she was still radiant, but privately, Dorothy was exhausted, a woman carrying far more than her share of burdens. By the early 1962nd, Dorothy Dandridge's star had dimmed. Once celebrated as a pioneer, she now found herself nearly forgotten in an industry that had moved on without ever truly embracing her. Roles dried up almost completely, and when she did find work, it was often in second-rate productions far beneath her talent. The Oscar nominee, who had once graced magazine covers, was reduced to struggling for gigs in small nightclubs, her finances collapsing under the weight of debt and poor management. Desperation forced Dorothy to sell her Hollywood home and live more modestly. But the debts didn't disappear. She was plagued by lawsuits, unpaid bills, and mounting expenses for her daughter's care. By now, Harlan had been placed in a state institution, a decision that haunted Dorothy. She loved her daughter fiercely, but she simply didn't have the resources to give her the medical attention she needed. The guilt was crushing. Emotionally, Dorothy became increasingly fragile. Friends recalled her swinging between moments of charm and deep despair, often numbing herself with alcohol and prescription pills. Once fiercely independent, she grew reliant on sedatives just to cope with the daily grind of disappointment. The glamorous woman, who once walked the Oscar red carpet, now seemed trapped in a cycle of despair and exhaustion. On the 8th of September, 1965, tragedy struck. Dorothy was found dead in her West Hollywood apartment at the age of 42. The official cause was listed as an accidental overdose of antidepressants, though some speculated it may have been suicide. Others whispered darker theories, pointing to the chaos of her finances and the possibility of foul play. Whatever the truth, the image of Dorothy lying alone in her apartment, gone far too young, was a devastating end to a life that had promised so much. Her funeral was a stark reminder of both her significance and her struggle. Hollywood royalty attended, yet many knew deep down that Dorothy had never been given the place she deserved. She had fought to break barriers, only to be broken by the very system she tried to change. Her death was not just the loss of a star, it was a chilling symbol of how racism and neglect can destroy even the brightest of lights. Dorothy Dandridge's life was short, but her impact reached far beyond her years. She opened a door that had been bolted shut, showing Hollywood and the world that a black woman could be glamorous, powerful, and worthy of standing center stage. Though the industry failed to honor her in life, her courage laid the foundation for future generations. Without Dorothy, there may have been no Halle Berry, no Viola Davis, no Lupita Nyong'o, women who openly credit her as a trailblazer. Her story is both an inspiration and a warning. It reminds us of the extraordinary resilience it takes to break barriers, but also of the devastating toll racism and systemic exclusion can take on even the strongest spirits. Dorothy's rise and fall is not just about Hollywood, it is about America, about how talent and beauty can be crushed when society refuses to see past skin color. Today, Dorothy Dandridge is remembered not as a tragic footnote, but as a pioneer. In 1999, Halle Berry portrayed her in Introducing Dorothy Dandridge, a performance that earned an Emmy and a Golden Globe, bringing Dorothy's name back into the spotlight. Decades after her death, her beauty and her struggle continue to haunt Hollywood, a reminder of both progress and unfinished business. Dorothy Dandridge dreamed of being more than a symbol. She wanted to be seen, respected, and loved as an artist. In telling her story, we honor that dream, and we make sure that the woman who once lit up the screen with unmatched brilliance is never forgotten.